record. I record my audio separately as well. So I'm going to hit record on that. And then if you're ready, I'm going to introduce you in 3, 2, 1. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen. Today, I am doing another show on amino acids. Why is that? Because they're just so important to aging better. And I feel that getting different perspectives is extremely important. So today I have a special guest. His name is Dr. Robert Wolfe, and he's the co-founder of the Amino Company, or Amino Co., which was formed to bring his own patented amino acid formulas developed over 40 years of clinical research to the public. And everyone, as you know, I've been using them myself. Now, Dr. Wolfe attended Berkeley, and he was a 3-sport varsity athlete. He continued his education for his PhD in clinical research, focusing on regulation of muscle metabolism, particularly as affected by aging and stressors. Dr. Wolfe also served as a faculty member at Harvard Medical School for 9 years and is currently the director of the Center for Translational Research in Aging and Longevity at the Reynolds Institute on Aging in Little Rock, Arkansas. He has published over 500 peer-reviewed research articles, 3 books, and holds many active patents. Wow, that's quite a bio, Dr. Wolfe. And with that, everyone, welcome Dr. Wolfe. Thank you so much for coming today.
Well, thanks for the invitation, and it's great to have the opportunity to share some of my thoughts about amino acids and nutrition.
Absolutely. And, I always love to ask your background, and I know a little bit, and the fact that you were a varsity athlete, 3 sports. So talk to me about your background.
Well, I think nobody really cares. The sports things are sort of like the Bruce Springsteen song of Glory Days. We don't really spend much time on that. I don't think anybody's too interested in that. But
Sure, of course.
It's kind of a unique thing. I think that as far as going at the University of California, over 120 years, I'm the only person to have lettered in 3 different sports. So that was, kind of diversity, not greatness in anything. But sports was always a big part of my youth. And of course, the reality set in as I got older and graduated from school and decided to really focus my efforts on metabolism and nutrition. The ending up as focused on aging and in particular muscle metabolism and aging has been kind of a winding trail. When I first started my academic career at Harvard Medical School, I was working at the Shriners Hospital for Burn Children, and I spent almost 30 years as the head of the metabolism unit at the Shriners Hospital for Burn Children. So this is a philanthropy that is focused on severe injury, children with an average of 70% 3rd-degree burns, and that was my main focus for a number of years. And what we saw evolve in the treatment of severely burned children was that when I first started, there was very little research done in the whole area of recovery from that kind of severe injury, and it's about a 30% 3rd-degree burn was 50% of kids died. And over the next several years, it evolved to where we were up to 98% 3rd-degree burns were surviving at 50%, and as long as there wasn't smoke inhalation. So we reached a point where the focus of my work, which was entirely on survival, really became kind of a completed project because the kids were surviving. But with a tremendous loss of muscle, the stress response was just visible. You could see the muscle melting away on a daily basis, and this made recovery extremely difficult, so that even though they survived, they had a really tough time integrating back into society. They couldn't, if they went back to school, they couldn't even participate in recess. Uh, and it was obvious that the problem was that the stress of the severe burn injuries so changed the muscle metabolism that normal nutrition alone was just not adequate to have them rebuild their muscle. And so I really focused my efforts on understanding the factors that control the rate at which muscle is produced, and how muscle strength is developed, and different approaches, all predicated on the application to severely burned children. But as it evolved, it turns out that muscle metabolism is muscle metabolism. It's not just unique to severely burned children, but we all have muscle, and probably not well appreciated that muscle not only plays a role in enabling us to do our activities of daily living and exercise, but that muscle is really at the center of all protein nutrition in the body. And so over the years, I really focused on various aspects of nutrition, from very severely injured people in ICUs to Olympic athletes. I was a member of the International Olympic Committee Committee on Nutrition, as well as worked for the U.S. Olympic Committee's U.S. swimming for 20 years. And so my range of experience with different approaches to enhancing muscle metabolism ranged from about as severe problem as possible to elite Olympic athletes. And all of this really gave me the background to attack the problem in old age as from a wide diversity of perspectives. And of course, I'm 76 years old now, so as my age increased, my interest increased. Just from a personal level, really came from the fact that I continued to run marathons until I completed over 60 marathons. But the thing that was interesting was that I could seemingly as I got older, I still felt fed and still could do workouts, but just the amount of exercise I could do and the amount of training I could do gradually declined, even though I was doing everything I could as far as training. And so I started really getting focused on this problem of maintaining muscle mass and function as you get older, that even as much as I was training, and that training involved living 10 miles from work and taking my clothes in a pack and running to work and running from work, home from work every day. But even that kind of training was not sufficient alone to maintain my full muscle function. And so I started really looking into it. And that's when I moved to Arkansas, that has the largest aging center in the country. And there's over 20,000 visits a year. And so there's a major focus on various aspects of the response to aging. And that's where I really found a niche in terms of developing approaches to tackle some of the problems that arise, particularly in older individuals, that we may not even recognize as occurring until it's too late, and the loss of function and quality of muscle and muscle metabolism is so great that it really is hard to reverse it. And so that's where my focus has been the last 20 years, really, is translating molecular kind of studies that are kind of academic things that people stack up the papers in the library, to really translating it to everyday human life. And my sort of mantra has been that no matter how sophisticated the research, but unless it translates to a product that you can put on the kitchen table and have everybody have access to, it really doesn't do any good. And so that's the unit that I developed and I'm head of is called the Center for Translational Research. And that's really my focus, is translating some of the basic molecular control mechanisms that change with aging to real products that people can take advantage of some of this sophisticated knowledge in a very practical way, and be able to improve their health and nutrition through some of the research that we do.
So, Dr. Wolfe, why is muscle so critical to aging better? Why is it so important?
Well, I think that we sort of have two levels of importance. One of which is, I think we all know that you lose muscle as you get older. You may not really feel it in your 40s and 50s, but it's happening. And then what really can happen in a large number of cases is that you still are able to do the activities you're interested in. Most people are not really that athletic or trying to run marathons, but just live the daily life. But then some event occurs, like an operation for a hip replacement or a severe disease like pneumonia, and that the loss of muscle has been so insidious that just that extra stress of a serious injury or illness causes a sufficient loss of muscle to where you really can't get back to a normal life. And one of the statistics that really motivated me to work so hard in the intensive care unit is the fact that nationwide, less than 40% of people that go into an intensive care unit and survive are able to return to work within a year after getting out of the intensive care unit, because the loss of muscle is so severe. And when you look at people over 60 that go into the intensive care unit, the loss of function is much more drastic than that. So that just the quality of life, and as well as longevity, is directly affected by your muscle mass and strength. And the other thing that is less well appreciated is that we have a requirement for certain amino acids that we call essential amino acids in our diet. And they're really the only macronutrient that's actually required for survival. And tissues like the muscle, like the heart and the liver and skin, require a constant supply of these amino acids to maintain their functionality. But the problem is that we don't eat a continuous amount of protein. We eat meals, and even we go from dinner to breakfast. You may have 15 or 20 hours between meals. And during that time, amino acids are not being absorbed, but they're still being required by these essential tissues and organs. So as a result, muscle is broken down, and those amino acids are released into blood, and they are actually providing the precursors to produce the proteins needed to maintain physiological function. We can actually do without the muscle. Muscle can be lost to a modest degree without really affecting any physiological function. So even just on a daily basis, muscle plays an important role in being able to maintain the amino acid availability to all the other tissues and organs in the body in times where we're not actually absorbing it from meals. So we see metabolic effects of muscle in terms of things like obesity and insulin sensitivity and heart function in particular is one that we've worked a great deal on, and liver function. All of these factors are directly related to the ability of muscle to maintain the amino acids in the blood necessary to keep those other functions operational. So there's really a wide variety of effects, and we can get into it a little more detail, but really it all boils down to that healthy aging. The first pivot point is maintaining an adequate muscle mass and muscle function. And a lot of things fall from that premise that this is the most important aspect of aging.
Actually, what you're saying, even when we look back in the 70s and 80s, I don't know, maybe they're still doing this in hospitals where they give elderly people who are in hospital Boost, the drinks, those, I'm sure you've seen that. And because they recognized even back then how critically important the amino acids are to getting better, right? And then also with muscle, I mean, it supports, it's just like, I work out with a personal trainer, and she's always like, you need to ensure that your legs are strong. People who have weaker legs, like quad muscles, they end up having knee issues later in life. So it's like supporting all of your functions as well, right? Your physical functions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the Boost. One of the things that inspired me to develop a product that was a lot more effective than normal nutrition was the fact that at our hospital, University of Arkansas, anyone over 65 gets a bottle of Boost on every tray still. and yet that we
Interesting.
we developed a product by comparison to Boost that's about 6 times as effective on a gram per gram basis in stimulating and recovery of muscle protein. But you know, people are locked into their habits, but
Isn't it,
there's no question.
sorry, Dr.
Right.
Wolfe, isn't it more about the bioavailability, like of those amino acids? You want to make sure you can absorb it all, right? Like,
Well, there are a number of factors that are important, and of course the first point is it has to come into the body to actually the protein is made up of amino acids. Some are essential, meaning that they aren't produced in the body. Others are not essential; they can be produced in the body, but they're part of dietary protein. So the effect of dietary protein is mediated by these amino acids that are absorbed. So if there is the lack of absorption, then that's obviously not going to do any good. And with aging, we see a very pronounced decrease in the digestibility of a lot of factors, in particular including dietary protein. And this becomes a real issue. If we look at beef, for example, about 98% is digested and absorbed in someone 20, and that figure may drop to as low as 75 to 80% in someone that's 75. So that any sort, and we look at plant-based proteins, it's even more, can be even more severe, where recent data is showing that the digestibility of certain plant proteins can be as low as 50%. So that we think we're getting a lot more protein than we are. The big advantage of using free amino acid formulations is they don't require digestion. So there's 100% absorption. So that's one aspect of it. But there are other aspects that are important as well, because when we take a dietary protein, it has all these non-essential amino acids that are not required for the production of new muscle protein, and are ultimately oxidized and used for energy. And the nitrogen is released and forms urea and ammonia in the blood that has to be excreted by the kidneys.
right. Oh, can I actually ask you about that? Because I find this really interesting, because if your body doesn't utilize the excess amino acids, and correct me, I'm not going to explain it as well as you can, but let's say you're eating 2 different types of protein, right? I'm eating chicken, and then let's say I'm having cheese. There's a difference in the amino acid profiles of those 2 types of proteins, and whatever your body can't use, it's excreted, right? Like it's like waste.
Yeah, and I think that I've spent a lot of time working with the WHO developing quantitation of protein quality that's based not just on digestibility, but the profile of the amino acids in the individual protein, so that we really actually have a quantitative rating of the protein quality, which in Europe is actually required to be included on packaging, but we haven't gotten to that point in the U.S. But I think that's an important point, that all proteins are not equal.
Yeah.
The thing with aging that's also important to recognize is that at least 60% of people over 65 have some degree of renal failure, not overt causing clinical problems, but nonetheless not as good function as younger people. So that as the urea and ammonia from the waste products of the excess dietary protein accumulate, it places a greater and greater burden on the kidney.
Yes.
And that's part of the reason for the older individuals that my formulations have focused entirely on the essential amino acids and not including any of the amino acids that ultimately form urea or ammonia, so that we get really 100% utilization of the amino acids that are given. There's no waste product. And in fact, what we actually see is that urea and ammonia decrease when you give essential amino acids, because the amino acids that are normally the excess that are converted to urea and ammonia are actually coming from the breakdown of protein already in the body. You're not providing any extra supply of the amino acids that are needed to produce these toxic products that have to be excreted by the kidney. So lots of bad things can occur from eating too much dietary protein as you get older, and most notably, urea and ammonia are directly affect mental function. So that if you're eating a lot of dietary protein that is not getting incorporated into the muscle tissue or other tissues in the body, those breakdown products, if the kidney is not working perfectly, can actually raise to the point that you start getting a deficiency in mental function, which I think is, as speaking as someone in that age group, the thing that we fear the most is losing our mental function. And you know, I'm certainly an advocate of eating plenty of dietary protein, but recognizing that as you get older, that this can become a problem. And that's why the formulations that are developed are specifically targeting the fact that they provide their benefit without any negative impact on the kidney or the need to excrete these waste products from the metabolism of excess amino acids. So I think that that's a key point of distinguishing this concept that there is a requirement for certain amino acids, but that when you say that you can have too much, that's only too much of certain amino acids, and that's the whole impetus behind my philosophy of targeting specific diseases and conditions with only the amino acids that are necessary, and not including the amino acids that require extra work by the kidney to get rid of.
It totally makes sense because, you know, okay, I am seeing a trend right now in the wellness industry where it's almost like amino acids are becoming the new protein powder. Now, I'm not saying that amino acids are equivalent to protein powder, but more and more of these wellness companies are getting into the amino acid business. But not all amino acid profiles are created equal, because it needs to be recognized by the body to help build muscle, right?
Yeah, well, I think that that's really a key thing to understand, that people might appreciate the necessity of aminos, but our formulations are not created equal. And in fact, one of the things that sort of testimony to that is I have 14 patents on different formulations of amino acids that target specific metabolic or physiological functions, such as the formulation that's optimal for reducing liver fat is quite different than for promoting muscle protein production, which is different from the optimal formulation to recover from surgery, and different enough that these have all got different patents predicated on the exact formulation of amino acids. So I think you're right that people have definitely keyed into the fact that amino acids are required in our diet, and that particularly in older individuals, that the normal diet oftentimes does not actually meet all the requirements for optimal protein nutrition. But I think that it's still less well appreciated that depending on what you're really targeting, that the optimal formulation may differ.
Yeah. And, you know, here's the other thing I want to get into, because I do find it fascinating that you do have different formulations. So there's the one that's, like you said, for liver. Then there's a different one for healing, right? Which my son actually has to have shoulder surgery. So he's also a varsity athlete like you were, and he has to have I can't say it, shoulder surgery. And so I'm like, okay, you're going to be taking these to help you recuperate better and faster, because he's got to go play baseball again next season, right? After the surgery. So what I like is that you have different formulations for different functions. I've been taking Life myself, and I personally have found, and you know, I'm going to be 53, so I'm no spring chicken either, but I have found that I am stronger. And I actually have checked my skeletal muscle, and it's improving since I've done a metabolic change in the way I'm eating. So talk to me about different reasons why, because I'm trying to talk my 85-year-old dad into taking amino acids, and he has osteoarthritis. And I know we're not going to make medical claims here, but how can it help, and with whom, for what reasons?
Well, I think that the life is the optimal formulation for older people is to have the basic need to support protein nutrition throughout the whole body. I think that the other aspect that I think people have started to really appreciate is that it's not just muscle that's supported by amino acids. The neurotransmitters in our brain, particularly dopamine and serotonin, are produced from essential amino acids. So the ratio of the amino acids in the blood can actually affect how alert and how upbeat we feel. If you take the life, that you'll find that the dopamine production is increased relative to serotonin, which gives a much more upbeat, kind of optimistic perspective on every aspect of life, so that you do get a wide variety of functions. But I think that one of the things that I think is really crucial to understand, and this will be relative to your son as well as to me, who's 76 years old, and I just had a hip transplant 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
And that is that and this is something which now has all of a sudden been popular in the medical nutrition, and that is what's called muscle memory. And that is that the more muscle you have and the better functioning muscle you have after a calamity like a major surgery or a big injury or sickness, that you can get back up to that level much faster than it took to get there to begin with. So that a lot of what you're doing with the life, it'll help you feel better, it'll help muscle develop, but it's really going to also, at some point in your life, in the next 20 years, you're going to have some major setback. It's almost inevitable. And the key to successful aging really is how fast do you rebound from your setbacks. And that is crucial to build up your muscle function and your muscle mass, to be able to have your muscle at a level that when you have this unavoidable problem like a hip surgery or some serious disease, that you can get back up to that level much more quickly. The distinction between life and the heel is the heel is also going to help build muscle mass. The predominant effect of life is increasing muscle strength. So that what happens is that in a normal physiology, that muscle protein is continually produced, and the older fibers that are not functioning well are broken down. So this is called muscle turnover. The faster the muscle turnover, the higher the quality of the muscle and the greater strength it has per unit mass. And the real design of life is targeting this process of turnover, so that for whatever whatever muscle mass you have, you're stronger. And that's really the key factor for functionality, is how strong your muscles are, not how much you have. But then when you have a surgery or something that really disrupts your training or your daily life, you actually lose significant muscle mass, and you really need to have a combination of aminos plus high quality protein to rebuild that muscle mass. And that's the distinction between the life and the heel, is that the heel comes with some high quality dietary protein whose effect is amplified by the essential amino acids that are added, with the net effect that you increase your muscle mass in addition to strength. Whereas the focus of life is more in terms of healthy neurotransmitter production as well as muscle strength. So the formulations differ significantly between those two. And I think for average older people, the life is really the targeted, the most appropriate, except when you have something like a hip surgery where you can just feel you've lost so much strength. And so over the past, I normally have been taking life as my predominant source But then after this hip surgery and in preparation for it, I've been working with the heel, because I know I could just see that I've lost muscle mass, and you know, that's a better approach. And parenthetically, you know, purely anecdotal, but when I went to see the physio after just yesterday, she was astounded at how much I had regrouped from the surgery, because I'm already having no problem walking without crutches, and asking her when I can play golf again. And she said most people
Nice.
are still lying in bed. So part of it is the
Right.
fact that my muscles were in good shape before I had the surgery. But I definitely convinced that the heel is helping me rebuild my muscle mass as well. So it depends where you are. You know, if you're overweight and that's your biggest metabolic problem, the liver formulation really is the best for that circumstance. We have, you know, if you look at the website, there are a lot of different explanations for what the rationale for the different formulations are, and you know, when it's optimal to take one as opposed to the other.
Yeah, the studies that are on your website and the information is, you can't compare it, actually. It's amazing. So you guys who are listening, make sure you go and check out the website, because you're going to just learn so much. And anecdotally, I will say this: I had COVID in the summer and I was unable to eat. I felt really, really sick, and I was concerned about losing the muscle that I have been working so hard to build. And as a woman almost 53, it's not easy to gain that muscle back
Yeah,
once you lose it, right? So I was
absolutely.
taking amino acids the entire time. And, you know, I will say that's what saved me during that time that I wasn't eating. So,
Well, it's not just anecdotally. We published a paper about 6 months ago about the benefit of aminos during COVID,
oh,
and
there you go.
one of the main aspects that's particularly relevant to COVID as well as other types of viral infection is that the whole immune function is dependent on adequate amino acid nutrition. And it's really tough when you have this what's called cachexia, where you really are losing weight, not just because of the metabolic response of muscle, but you just can't eat it. It just, you know, when you're that sick, you just can't eat a big steak to counter that effect. And this is where we found a big effect in cancer patients that are undergoing treatment, that we're able to provide enough amino acids to maintain the strength to actually complete chemotherapy. That's one of the biggest problems that face cancer patients, older cancer patients in particular, is just not having the strength to be able to tolerate the chemotherapy that's necessary to eliminate the cancer. But by maintaining, and you just don't feel like eating enough
Yeah.
to get the necessary nutrition. But the amino acids are entirely digested, even in that circumstance. They entirely come into the body, and it's just a liquid drink that can be taken by someone that really has no appetite for anything.
Yes.
So we really see that as a really important application of the aminos, is that when you say all that hard work, I mean, I have been, only in the last couple of years have I started really doing a lot of weightlifting. And I felt like, you know, it really was helping me a lot. But I really have always hated doing it. I love sports, but weightlifting was one thing I never liked doing. But I felt really good about building that muscle up. But then when I had this tremendous hip pain, I started getting atrophy in my right leg, to where by the time I had my surgery, my right leg was half the size of my left leg. And you're sitting there thinking, God, I've worked so hard to get this muscle, you know, how can it just be wilting away? And even though I was taking aminos, I was still losing it. I think that this response was just so big to it. But now 2 weeks later, and you can hardly tell which leg was which in terms of the problem. So I'm really, I think that from a practical standpoint, it really does make a difference.
Yes. I mean, I feel the difference, and I'm now doing assisted pull-ups for the first time in my life. So there you go, right? Like, so there's something
Yeah.
happening. There's something happening. Now, are there So we talked about why we would want to maintain or increase muscle. I mean, I know I've heard this so many times where people, and we talked about the kidneys, the effect on the kidneys if you're eating too much protein, and the over acidification of the body. Now, what about digestion? Because that comes into play. Like, I mean, if you don't have ample stomach acid, you also can't break down that steak that you're eating, right? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, the enzymes that are responsible for digestion of protein are proteins themselves. So that if you have an inadequate, this is one of the things that's a real sort of a catch-22, that in conditions where you really need more dietary protein because of whether it be disease or lack of availability in third world countries, that one of the things that is made of the essential amino acids are the enzymes that digest dietary protein. So that as you are more debilitated and needing the protein to a greater extent, you're actually, part of the problem is the enzymes that are needed for digestion are no longer being produced at an adequate rate, so that digestion goes down considerably, even though you need those amino acids from the dietary protein all the more. And that's why I focused almost entirely on the free essential amino acids, because they are absorbed directly by the same mechanism that glucose is absorbed. So you don't need any digestion to occur. So in circumstances of impaired digestion, which is any sort of critical illness, serious disease, or even just healthy aging, that you still get the key nutrients that you need, because the absorption of the essential amino acids in the free form occurs regardless of what the conditions.
Okay. Now, what's the difference between, because you're also seeing a lot of people now taking only branch chain amino acids versus the entire gamut of essential amino acids. What's the difference and which is better?
Well, the branched chain amino acids are leucine, isoleucine, and valine. And those are 3 of the 9 essential amino acids that the body requires for health. So that so there's not really the answer to your question is a little more complicated than what's the difference. There is no difference in the sense that the branched chain amino acids are essential amino acids. The branched chain, just a little sort of historical aspect, the branched chain amino acid supplementation was developed entirely in the context of amplifying serotonin, amplifying dopamine production in the brain relative to serotonin. And there's never been any claim based on data that branched chain amino acids actually promote protein synthesis in muscle or other tissues. The reason that they're not successful is that the protein in your body is composed of all the essential amino acids. So you need all 9 essential amino acids to produce a new protein. And although the branched chain amino acids are the most abundant, for example, in muscle protein, there's more leucine than any of the other essential amino acids, but you need them all to produce a complete protein.
Yeah.
And the way proteins are made is you have a template, and then one amino acid after the next to the next to the next is added on, depending on the order that's dictated by the template. And once you reach an amino acid requirement that you don't have that amino acid there, then the synthesis of the protein just stops. So that there have been a number of studies with branched chain amino acids that have shown that, all of which have shown that they don't provide the necessary complement of all the essential amino acids to produce new protein. They can serve a role in terms of mental acuity, but beyond that, they really have no value in terms of protein synthesis. So with an essential amino acid blend, you still get the same effect on the dopamine synthesis, but by providing the other needed essential amino acids, that's how the total amount of protein produced is able to be increased.
So would this make sense to you? Would you describe the formulations of the different amino acids, for example, that the Amino Co has would mimic what nature would provide to us in an ideal situation if we weren't aging, if our digestion was perfect and everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think that if we were going to have a general, just one general formulation for all circumstances, then that would be exactly right. But it turns out that specific metabolic problems really require targeted nutritional therapy that doesn't occur in any naturally occurring protein. So
Okay.
that, for example, whey protein is probably has the greatest effect in stimulating muscle protein production of any dietary protein. But the amino acid formulation in whey protein is not the optimal for stimulating protein synthesis in muscle. And the formulation that I developed, comparing gram for gram against whey protein, is about 3 times as effective, because the not to get into the details of the molecular production of regulation of the production of muscle protein, but whey protein is an ideal protein for a whole body nutrition and dietary requirements in all the tissues, but not specifically targeting muscle tissue. Whereas if you take something like HEAL, we're specifically targeting the control of muscle protein. And the same thing with the other products that are targeting other specific metabolic issues, that there's really no dietary protein available that would actually be able to meet all of those requirements exactly the way you'd want. That's really the beauty of the free amino acid formulations. And I think the thing that attracted me to the whole field back in the 90s was the inability to come up with any dietary protein where the amino acid profiles actually were the optimal in terms of fueling any particular metabolic process. So that's sort of the underpinning of why we have specific formulations for different applications in the Amino Co.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. Now we need to get into mTOR a little bit, because I have heard from different, you hear different things from different experts, and some people will say, oh, when you intermittent fast, you're deactivating mTOR. I got it right, didn't I? Deactivating mTOR. When you're eating too much protein and you're having too many amino acids, you're activating mTOR, which can shorten lifespan. Like, what are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, mTOR, the phosphorylation state, or the state of mTOR, is a regulator of protein synthesis. And that's throughout the body, all processes. And it's one of those things where you need just the right amount, because cancer tissue is the same as every other tissue that protein synthesis is stimulated by activation of mTOR. So an excessive activation of mTOR can promote protein synthesis not only in healthy tissue but in diseased tissues as well. And this is why we want to not go overboard. In particular, the most effective stimulator of mTOR activity in normal life is insulin, the hormone insulin, the same that's responsible for taking up glucose from the blood. So that diets that are high in carbohydrates that activate or stimulate the release of insulin are going to be the most effective in activating mTOR. But at the same time, there has to be a certain level of mTOR activity for the amino acids that are eaten to produce increased muscle protein or any other protein in the body. So that we have to have a reasonable activation. Now, the best way to think about mTOR, I think, in relation to production of protein in the body, whether it be cancer cells or healthy muscle cells, is that it's like a starter engine on a car, that it activates all the processes in the muscle that are required for protein synthesis to occur at the molecular level.
Mhm.
But the amino acid supply is analogous to the gasoline in a car, so that you can turn the starter on and you can have just a little bit of gas, still in the fuel line, and you get the car started. But if you're going to actually run it, you got to have gasoline coming in, and that's really what the situation is in the nutritional field. That you can activate the mTOR, and that's the whole rationale for the BCAAs of thinking that it might activate protein synthesis, because they do activate mTOR. But if you don't have an adequate supply of all the necessary essential amino acids, analogous to the gasoline in a car, then you're not going to go very far in terms of producing new protein. So that's why we want to try to minimize dietary intake of foods that elicit a big insulin response. And parenthetically, that's another aspect of giving the essential amino acids, is that we get actually no stimulation of insulin secretion, which is highly activated in response to other dietary proteins. And so that's
Right.
part of the overall health aspect that we get in the absence of adverse effects. We don't have to deal with the overstimulation of mTOR, because just the dietary amino acids alone are not going to activate mTOR to any sort of level that would promote cancer growth.
And also, Dr. Wolfe, if you're eating loads and loads of, let's say, animal protein, you could be activating that process, because even too much protein can dump glucose into the blood, right? Through
Yes,
the process of,
exactly. Well, particularly the non-essential amino acids, so that the whole that's what you just said is the exact scenario. If you eat too much dietary protein, you stimulate the insulin, and if you're obese, it's much worse, because the insulin secretion is stimulated, but then it's not effective in terms of lowering the glucose. So that feeds back to get even more and more and more of an increase in insulin. Now you're in the situation where you get a stimulation of mTOR, and this is the basis for why obesity is linked to cancer, because you have such a high insulin level to try to combat the lack of effectiveness in terms of clearing glucose from the blood. But it has the inadvertent effect of stimulating mTOR and stimulating protein growth even in cancer cells. So that's really part of the one of the key aspects of the free amino acids is, first of all, they're vegan, so that anybody that is interested in avoiding animal protein can improve the protein quality of their diet by taking essential amino acids without impacting their belief in whatever the rationale for a vegan diet would be.
Mhm.
But at the same time, that there is no stimulation of growth hormone, there's no stimulation of insulin. So that what we're dealing with is a pure metabolic nutritional effect, not an unpredictable effect resulting from activation of proteins of hormones that we'd really rather keep at a normal level.
Okay, that's a really important piece for anyone who's listening. Just to understand that whole activation and what would actually activate mTOR to excess. I mean, everything's all about balance, right? This
Yeah.
is life. We want balance in everything we do. Now, let me ask you this. What, you may or may not have a direct answer for this. What age-related diseases might amino acids help to prevent or mitigate your risks?
Well, I think that the major target of all the products really is maintaining healthy muscle mass and function. It's actually, and I've written a paper that really makes the point that a lot of the diseases, from heart failure to cancer to osteoporosis, renal kidney disease, all stem from inappropriate protein nutrition. But the main thing that ties all this together is muscle mass and function, and that if there was one thing that I target as the most important, it's that. And I think that it's kind of as an explanation of why I have that perspective. And you see this as you get older yourself, and that is how much of your life is dependent on mobility. And that what I'm really concerned with is quality of life more so than longevity, because I'd rather, if I had a choice of a certain length of lifespan where my brain function is good and I can do the activities I want to do, that this really is more important than just being able to keep breathing and have my heart beating. And that when it comes to quality of life, there's no question that maintaining adequate muscle strength is really the key. And so that's the underpinning of everything, that we need to keep our muscles healthy. And that includes a good normal diet, it includes exercise, and it includes amplifying those beneficial effects with sufficient essential amino acids to promote the maintenance of muscle mass and physical function.
Are there any contraindications to taking amino acids at all?
Well, I think that there are a few very rare diseases that have enzymatic deficiency in metabolizing certain amino acids. Like there's one called maple syrup urine disease where leucine can't be metabolized, and there's another called phenylketonuria where the phenylalanine can't be metabolized. But these are genetic diseases that are identified within the first year of life.
Oh,
So
okay.
that it's very unlikely that a person, in fact, it's impossible that a person would reach the age of 50 or 60 without knowing that this was an issue. And the only way you can survive is with a very special diet. Other than that, that's really the beauty of this whole field, is that and the thing that I'd like to emphasize to the listeners more than anything is that not only are these not harmful, but the essential amino acids are required for a normal life. You don't have to have any carbohydrate intake. You can live a totally normal life with no carbohydrate intake. The Eskimos or Inuit in Alaska are a good example of surviving with no metabolic problems to speak of at all, with a pure fat and protein diet. And similarly, you really don't need fat. You need a little bit of fat, 2% of caloric intake of fat, just for a few essential fatty acids that are necessary for hair and a few things like that. But fundamentally, the essential amino acids are the only required nutrients that we have, so that we're not, sort of out there working with obscure molecular compounds that we've derived in a benchtop. These have been identified since the early 1900s as essential for our daily life. That's where the term essential amino acids come into. So what we're really doing is just optimizing protein and amino acid nutrition by giving these essential amino acids in the profile that will round out what you are eating as to result in the optimal effect in the body.
Okay. Now, let's maybe you know the answer to this, maybe you don't, but if I was to compare absorbability of, let's say, a whey protein powder to amino acids, I've read that protein powders have such low absorbency. We've already talked about amino acids and the high absorbency and bioavailability. Do you even know what, because I've heard it's very, very low with protein powders.
Yeah, actually, whey protein is one of the reasons it's popular, is that whey protein itself is pretty highly digested. And that's one of the big advantages when you get so that whey protein in a normal, healthy young person, it's about 92% absorbed of what you eat. So that's pretty
Okay.
high.
That is high.
Some of the nutritional supplements now are using other proteins where the profile of amino acids might be good, but their digestibility is quite low. For example, pea protein has become quite popular, and its absorbability is about 50%. So that about half of what you eat is not even getting into the body. So irrespective of whether it's the optimal amino acid profile, the digestibility is the key factor. And I mentioned the quantitation of protein quality that we have now that is used in packaging in Europe, and certainly at some point is likely to replace if you look at the nutrition labels on any package, it has the amount of protein, but it doesn't really tell you how much effective protein there is. It doesn't account for digestibility. It doesn't account for the amino acids in it, so that you could have a protein with a very low digestibility. For example, wheat protein would be one of the worst, so that you may have 10 grams of wheat protein in this product, but in terms of just starting point, how much actually gets into the body, and maybe less than half of that actually gets in the body. So it varies a lot. I think one of the reasons for the popularity of whey protein is that it is better than most. That being said, the speed of digestion has to be a factor, because the whey protein can give you a bloated feeling that will. And one of the things we want to be sure about any proteins or amino acid supplement, it doesn't impact how much you eat at the next meal. Where with the whey protein, it gives you a full feeling that has been shown in many studies to decrease the amount of protein eaten at the next meal. So that even though it's highly digested, it takes a lot longer to be digested than a free amino acid base.
Yeah, that's actually too what I've researched, that some of, and also it depends on if it's high heat, how it was actually made, and then also what are the additives in there. I know me personally, I never feel good, and I've tried so many high quality protein powders, and it just doesn't make me feel good. Doesn't make my belly happy. So
well, I think that's a pretty common response.
yeah, I think so too.
That's one of the reasons that fundamentally these mixtures are free amino acids.
Okay, well, we're almost at the hour, so let's wrap this up just so that we can make it clear for my listeners, because I'm a 52-year-old woman. I want to know, how can I optimize my wellness? I walk my dog every day. I work out really, really hard twice a week doing weights. I am active. I am, close to menopause. So for a woman like me, and then there's the factor we didn't even talk about, how there's so much of this non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, right? Like, it's like everybody's got this. And so I don't know. I guess it's our food, it's what we're eating. But if for me to optimize my wellness, would I take, and this is a healthy woman, 52, would I take it every day? Would I take it a couple times a day? Would I mix in a little bit of that liver sauce? I'm going to call it a liver sauce, but it's liver for optimizing liver function amino acids. I know that. So what's the best way for me to take this?
Well, I think that you need to kind of look at yourself and say, what's my biggest problem? If you're overweight.
No problems, Dr. Wolfe. None at all. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
If you're overweight, then the liver fat is almost part of that. And that's where you should be taking the liver formulation, because one of the major problems of obesity is that the excess fatty acids coming to the liver impair a lot of the metabolic function of the liver, which in turn amplifies diabetes and insulin resistance. So if you're in that category, the liver formulation is preferable. If you're looking for just amplifying your daily health routine, then the more balanced amino acid formulation in life is really the optimal, because regardless of whether you're eating a great diet or not a great diet, the amino acids in life will give you a balanced stimulation of protein synthesis throughout the body. It'll maintain your neurotransmitter production and give you a good feeling of healthiness, and maintain or even improve muscle strength. Keep in mind, we did a study in 92 individuals with older women with heart failure, and had a uniform and in a double-blind study, and found that the taking only the life improved the ability to perform how much they could walk in 6 minutes, as well as speed of walking without any other activity. And this is with an N of 92 individuals with heart failure. So, and this has just recently been published. So that it really has a sort of a what I'd call a general effect, but that one that definitely improves muscle function. The HEAL is designed specifically for recovery, whether it be a real blasting weight workout or more commonly surgery or severe illness. And we have others in the pipeline. We have one specifically for kidney disease to account for this problem that in kidney disease that people are recommended to cut their dietary protein because of the problem with the kidney. But then as you cut dietary protein, you have problems with muscle, which end up leading to a whole cascade of other physiological problems. So
Amazing.
So I think that but for a good general, it just sounds like what you listed off of what you do would be almost exactly what I'd recommend, and that is that you take one dose a day of the life. There's certainly no problem in taking more. It just becomes kind of a burden if you're taking more than once a day. Unless, like I take once a day on my normal maintenance, but in this time period of recovering from the surgery, I actually have been taking aminos 3 times a day.
Yes.
And I feel like, any kind of real stressful state, the requirement goes up and the ability for the body to actually deliver those increased requirements goes down. So that that's when you have to start increasing the intake. So I think that's, spending a little time on our website, educating yourself on why these different formulations are different and sort of what the biology is. I think it's really worthwhile. I think in this day and age, you really have to be careful and thorough in investigating the rationale for what we're eating, because there's so much material out there about people's belief, and they mix science and philosophy and everything ranging from politics to personal beliefs. And I think it really helps to understand a little bit more about why am I taking this supplement than to just blindly take it because somebody has gotten on TV and told you that you'll feel better if you take it.
Yeah, very good advice, Dr. Wolfe. Thank you so much. Where can we find you? What's your website?
I think that amico.com, I think, is the website for the company. Yeah. I don't have a personal website, but okay. I know that if you have specific questions for me, I get them referred from the amico.com. There's a place you can specifically ask the question, and I get those all the time, and I'm happy to answer them. I don't. It's most convenient to do it through the website, so that there's a little filtering that otherwise I.
So we're not all calling you.
Yeah,
I don't think you want that, Dr. Wolfe. No.
Yeah, I don't mind it. It's just that that it can be a matter of kind of inundated if it's not a little bit filtered. But I get back. If I get a question, I get back within the next day or two, and I'm happy to answer questions that indicate that the person has actually thought a little bit about, what their optimal nutrition should be.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time today. You are a wealth of information. Thank you.
Well, thank you for including me. I really appreciate the chance to talk. It's sort of become my mission in life to try to educate people more about the essential amino acids. As I said, they've been recognized since the early 1900s, and yet most people draw a blank when I tell people that I'm working primarily with essential amino acids, and I get a blank look like, what's that? And so every chance I have to spread the word is appreciated.
I'm with you, and I'm there to help. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
All right. The audio is done. That was so good. I think that went really well.
Well, I enjoyed the conversation. I hope I didn't go on too much on some of the things, but
no, you know what? It was so good. I'm just gonna save the file, because imagine if I lost that. I've done that before where I thought I didn't save it. And then I was in a panic going, oh my God, like if I have to redo, because, you know, it's hard to duplicate something when it works really well, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, I suffer the same thing when I'm writing projects and then I forget to hit save and you think,
Not
oh
good.
no, back to square one. So it's never easier the second time, that's for sure.
No, that's not good. And I'm impressed with your recovery. You know, my dad had his knee replaced. So he's 85 now. And he's a very, very active man. He rides his bike from his house to my house, which is maybe, see, I'm going to tell you in kilometers, 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers. I'm Canadian. So,
Okay, well,
but
that's 6.10 kilometers, 6.2 miles. I'm living in New Zealand right now, so
oh, there
it's
you
like
go.
speaking a foreign language. Anytime anybody tells me the difference, I have to think about it in my mind. But I've done so much running and races that all the different Ks, I know exactly how many miles it is. So that impresses people.
Yeah.
It's like I'm bilingual.
That's amazing because you know, my podcast is mostly American listeners. I think it's like 72% American listeners. So you know, I'm always, and I record a lot with Americans, so I'm always like, oh, kilometers, Celsius, Fahrenheit, you know, like it's just,
Celsius Fahrenheit is a lot harder for me,
oh,
but
I can't.
the distances I've gone down.
Yes.
But we published a paper just about 3 or 4 years ago on recovery from knee replacement, and
Yeah.
the heel really had a beneficial effect. Keeping in mind that the knee replacement is a tougher recovery than the hip replacement, even though it's actually not as big an operation. It's such a more complicated joint that
Yes.
it's actually a little tougher. I don't think he'll be back to full speed in 2 weeks after.
Well,
I would say, parenthetically, I'm not back to full speed, but I'm functioning a lot better than would be expected. And in fact, I had the hip replacement on the other leg 15 years ago. So I was 15 years younger, but I didn't have access to amino acids and was much slower in the recovery. So, there is a N of one. I have a little bit of a comparison, and it's been, I have no doubt that there's a beneficial effect. And so anyway, we need to encourage him to do that.
well, he had it, but now it's his other knee. Like he's good. Like, except it's his other knee that's going now. So I'm trying to get, anyway, I'm trying, you know, he's pretty good about listening to me. My mom makes him take all the stuff that I tell them to take. But, you know, at the same time, you know, he also has osteoarthritis, so he's got other stuff. And his biggest saying is, if I don't move, I'm dead. So I just got to keep riding my bike. I got to keep
Yeah, no,
doing what I'm doing. He loves
I
to
think that
move.
that's a great attitude to have, and it's really to some extent true. I mean, I think that you fall apart pretty fast at 85 when you stop doing exercise.
Totally, totally. I agree. Well, thank you again. It was so
Okay,
nice to meet you. And
I'm
I
glad
will
we
be,
got the technical issues sorted out. I really don't know what the problem was, but
it
yeah,
happens. You're not the only one. It happens with Google Meet sometimes. And
yeah.
I think it might
Well, the thing
be,
that was peculiar was with Zoom. I use Zoom all the time, and that
yeah,
my it was that I couldn't hear you and you couldn't hear me. So it was. I mean, the thing that was weird was that you could see me initially, but couldn't hear me. Then you could
yeah.
hear me, but you couldn't see me. It's like one or the other. So anyway,
Well,
we got it
it all
done.
worked
So
out.
yeah,
And
thanks again.
I'll be in touch with your media team to let them know when it's coming out and when it will be published. And
Okay,
I
great.
wish you speedy recovery with your
Thank
hip.
you.
And I
Yeah,
hope
I'm
you have
working
a
on it.
wonderful Christmas.
You too.
And yeah, we will be in touch. Thank you so much,
Okay,
Dr.
so long. Bye, Sandy.
Bye-bye.